Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure, a great honor, and a great privilege to have been invited by Sir Professor Ruggiero Maria Santilli to this Augustus Teller conference of the Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen debates in the restoration of Einstein determinism, and to have been invited on such a majestic topic so close to the heart. I'm Ananda Bosman, and I'm the anchor and co-writer of a mainstream television series called Mystics. We chose Ruggiero Maria Santilli to be part of this TV series for a particular purpose: to have the science of mystics be this new branch of hadronic mechanics. In February of this year, I traveled with my friend and colleague, filmmaker, Hollywood filmmaker, Parampal Gill, and his Hollywood crew across America to visit the Santillis. In the Mystics TV series, we interview mystics from all walks of life and how they've integrated the mystical experience into their lives and in making a betterment of their lives and of the world. This is the quality that we are presenting. I chose Ruggiero Maria Santilli as a semantic artist. We had our mystical experiences early on, which caused us to dive deep into the mystical and philosophical sciences. And in my early 30s, I was introduced to the novel new branch that Ruggiero Santilli has been pioneering, and it became truly endearing. A semantic artist makes multimedia paintings of understanding. The paintings of understanding uses different media. On the palette, for the brushstrokes of understanding, there will be different fields, each of which must be highly detailed and technical. So you can have Egyptology as one color. You might have hadronic mechanics as another. There might be the Rigveda as another. There can be cybernetic theory as another. Sacred geometry is another. Astronomy is another. And so from this palette, you make paintings of understanding. And so we have drawn many artworks that way, which included rich brushstrokes of the hadronic mechanical sciences because of mystical, philosophical, and spiritual, artistic implications, beautiful implications on these fields. Ruggiero and I started conversing about him appearing in this series in November, and he immediately said, well, this is great timing because next summer we have the EPR debates worldwide, and it is going to be historic, which indeed it is. This is history in the making, the advent of a new chapter of science and a revisioning of the world. Professor Santilli's thinking itself is as alive and lucid as that of a mystic, but from the perspective of a scientist. So you should all read the script of our episode with Ruggiero Santilli for Mystics. I also highly recommend you watch the documentary because other vantages, other perspectives emerged in that. Now, also from a mystical perspective, what Ruggiero Santilli has elucidated, has discovered, has innovated, is identical to that of a mystic. A mystic also must responsibly, compassionately implement their experience to the betterment of mankind. And this is exemplified absolutely in the practical applications that have emerged from this new branch of science, whether it is magna gas, hypercombustion, and now with the restoration of Einstein determinism in particle physics, a future where we legally can reverse radioactivity, as will be the feature or the highlight, I believe, of the third day of this conference. So I will extract about 5 points from the interview, as our presentation is mystical implications of Einstein determinism. And indeed, there are many, many, but 5 nuggets of gold we will focus on. One of the prime ones I've presented in my semantic art presentations in 25 countries for 34 years, and with a almost 20-year period, including hadronic mechanics, has been the early work of 1956 of Ruggiero, which describes matter to be empty and space rigid. And we will look specifically at that and the marvelous additions that Ruggiero brought in to bring and amplify the significant implications of this further. Many mystics all over the world, different traditions, different religions, different spiritual backgrounds, do describe a state of universal oneness. For this now to emerge from the physical sciences by scientific logic is phenomenal. It's itself a miraculous, mystical manifestation that is duly noted and has irreversible impact on our world. There's also a description of innate or primordial emptiness, vacuity of all things, the coexistence of both. And this is described philosophically or poetically with examples in very ancient literature and in more recent literature of the mystical traditions. So we will look a little at that. This is one aspect which is a good bottleneck to launch into the 5 points. Another is macroscopic coherence and microscopic coherence and their continuum of oscillations between microscopic and macroscopic coherence, which also tallies exactly with the ancient concepts of the oneness and emptiness in coexistence. It describes this continuous indivisibility of the microscopic irreversibility and macroscopic irreversibility, which itself is a tremendous discovery. Another area is the full entanglement of all space of the universe, the full entanglement of the entire universe and the mystical implications of that. Even more and complementary to that is the universal entangled universe, all time entangled in the universe, which draws a phenomenal implication, mystical, spiritual, philosophical. And of course, the genetic sciences that can now begin to be looked at, and the implications of the complexity of the DNA and the hyperstructured orders behind them. Here is a photograph of our mid-February visit with Param Jill, filmmaker, who is on the far right here. He's made several Hollywood movies, also Bollywood movies, but a major movie is at the moment being released. Next to him is the great Professor Ruggiero Maria Santilli, and of course, the gracious Carla Santilli, and yours truly. So we have a scene of Ruggiero coming in with the safari to the Florida beach, where certain topics are discussed. So knowing the branch of hadronic mechanics for almost 20 years and looking freshly at mysticism and mystical experiences, we wanted that this would be the new science that would underlay each of the different mystics that we will interview, and that will continue into further seasons. In the first season, it will be fairly well-known characters to begin with. And this is going through proper Hollywood distribution, so this is going to end up on something like Netflix. Very early poster of mystics. Hadronic mechanics will be the foundation of the science of mystics. In our field, in my field of the mystical and philosophical sciences, quantum mechanics has a strong spell-binding grip on those fields. So there's much dispelling to do and progress to be made that can now be made by this restoration of Einstein determinism, by this novel branch of hadronic mechanics. So in 1956, why space is empty, Dr. Centilli kind of describes the state that the Rigveda calls sunyateya, immaculate emptiness, and ananteya, infinite oneness, or imperishable infinity of the macrocosm and microcosm. I got a 2002 translated edition of this. And I've been sharing this for years to our public audiences the world over. We, and I quote, "We would not be able to hear each other's voices without Earth's atmosphere. We would be unable to see each other's faces without a universal medium, ether, propagating light. Since light is a transversal wave, the ether must necessarily be rigid. The only possibility for matter to freely move in space without the ethereal wind is that all electrons, protons, and neutrons constituting matter are oscillations, vibrations of the ether. When matter is moved from one position to another, there is no actual motion of any solid, but merely the transfer of the basic oscillations forming matter from one position in space to another. An extraordinary concept. Stated in plain terms, matter is totally empty and space is totally full. This is a deep mystical insight. But in the interview for Mystics, Ruggiero gave great clarification to this early work by pointing out that electromagnetic waves, like light, are transversal oscillations that occur perpendicular to that of their propagation. Thereby, this is only possible if there is a ether, which is the equivalent to our concept of rigidity. He pointed out that the electron's resting mass is 0.511 mega electron volt. And when this is converted to frequency by a certain QM law, which is given in the interview script, you get a frequency, a massive frequency of 0.829 10 to the power of 20 hertz. This is an extraordinary frequency. This humongous frequency is not really possible to be contained in a little mass, he will point out. So, as an oscillation inside the electron, with such a high frequency, that doesn't make sense. So what is oscillating? Ruggiero would bring forth. The 0.829 10 to the power 12 hertz is the frequency of the oscillation of a point of the ether, characterizing an electron at rest. Instead, when the electron moves, there is no motion, as this quote relays, but the transfer of the characteristic oscillations from one point of the ether to another. Inertia is a natural resistance, he pointed out, by ether against such propagation. Similar features for other elementary particles and macroscopic masses are also applicant. So we have a new view of reality. Now, in the Rigveda, and we choose the Rigveda because it's one of the most ancient archaic manuscripts, and it has a prose, semantic prose, that is mathematical, deeply mathematical, as has been demonstrated in the NASA Ames research that studied ancient languages and found that the Sanskrit, Proto-Sanskrit prose had a trinary semantic network system, similar to what is used in artificial intelligence. Furthermore, there is a science in that the work of Dr. Subhash Kak, the astronomical code of the Rigveda, identifies that the semantic prose of the Rigveda follows the ordering of the temporal cycles of planets of our solar system. And furthermore, the Rigveda appears to be the root of many, many different mystical traditions and concepts, and is a very rich poetry that is not linear like the later Quranic literature. So it's really the root of inspiration of many, many different traditions that have stemmed off from it, including our Western mystic, spiritual, and religious traditions. That's a topic for another time. In the Rigveda is the concept of the cosmopolis. It's a cosmic ether pillar. It's a pillar of oneness, infinity, and emptiness coexisting, and utilizing an ambrosia, a prima materia, which has several expressions, including a unifying media called akasha. Sunyateya is one component of this cosmopolis, omnipolis, which is called Shamba, the Shamba pillar, the foundation of the cosmos. Sunyateya, immaculate emptiness, representing the zero, or the all. Ananteya, infinite oneness. Unlimited equals infinity, the infinite one. And the coexistence of these is called Amriteya. Amrita means ambrosia. Teya means imperishable. So Amriteya is the indivisible, co-present, indivisible coexistence of Sunyateya and Ananteya as all one, the all oneness experience. In the mystical states, there is the rapture where through, let's say, a near-death experience, one experiences the oneness of the universe, but it can go to render to deeper states of a whole oneness. In science, we've seen visionary thinkers like Dr. David Bohm express this in wholeness and the implicate order. The Shamba cosmopolis then is a composite of sunyata, emptiness, void, vacuum, all of these descriptions, vacuity, a state, a plenum of vacuity, plus teya, which is imperishable, immaculate, immortal. Ananta, infinite oneness, infinite, infinity, also the endless union of the macrocosm and microcosm in its composite. So an endless, infinite oneness of and union of microcosm and macrocosm. Teya, imperishable, immaculate, immortal. So, and the Amrita as premature ambrosia, indivisible co-presence and indivisible coexistence of the Sunyateya and Anteya, plus the Teya, which is imperishable or immortal or immaculate. So this is seen as the foundation of creation in its actual essence. So here we use the universal ether as the Shambhapila, and we have the oneness and the emptiness that overlap in indivisible co-presence in our presentations. The Shambhapila of the cosmopolis as the universal substratum of the ether, being the indivisibility of both. So in the interview with Ruggiero, of course, beautiful extrapolations, we designed a series of questions that would enable the scope of the discoveries of Ruggiero's life be clarified and in context to the present EPR debates in this novel historic event. So many different topics, preliminary topics, preceded these mystical topics to give clarity on the exact studies and discoveries that have led to these present announcements of the restoration of Einstein determinism. So, having explained the nature of the resting state of the electron and its phenomenal frequency, Ruggiero Santilli ends the answer to this particular question, which is question 16, with, quote, "The thought-provoking conclusion is that matter is completely empty of any conventional mass, while space is completely full of the hyper-dense ether." So this is an extraordinary manifestation coming out of scientific logic that is near identical to what the most archaic mystical literature would describe as the foundation of reality. But this is a new chapter because it emerged from science and physics and chemistry, mathematics and logic itself. It's phenomenal. Descriptions of the Sunyateya and Anteya indivisibility and their co-presence emerge in the scribe for the Tibetan Book of the Dead, Yeshe Chokshel, whose many writings are still being found to this day. Academic Tibetanologist Keith Doman has translated them with all of the academic methodologies that are required. She has an austere life of practice, of contemplation, of meditation, of examining the existential ontological foundation of reality, and comes to this state of the ati-sphere, the utmost sphere, which is the coexistence of immaculate emptiness and infinite oneness, behind all phenomenon, or underlaying all phenomena. And of course, this has philosophical implications, personal implications. If matter is empty of any conventional mass, what is it that we are attached to, for example? Tremendous strides emerge from these discoveries stemming out of science. The universal ether and the etherino, of course, was explored and well laid out in the interview and the script of the interview. So the universal backset of the ether, hyperdense media, and the propagation, the longitudinal propagation of the ether itself as the etherino. So the etherino, of course, became evident as a significant factor beginning in 2006. The Etherino proof, Santilli dedicated decades in mathematical, theoretical, experimental, industrial research in the synthesis of the neutron from the hydrogen atom having a single proton and electron. By fusing the proton and electron into a neutron, as is occurring in stars, for which he has been nominated a number of times for the Nobel Prize in physics. As this synthesis cannot be treated by quantum mechanics, a full solution is admissible via hadronic mechanics, the new branch. In completing, Rogier is completing the insufficiencies of quantum mechanics into the new branch of hadronic mechanics. This picture depicts the orbit of the extended electron, comprised inside the hyperdense proton, which approaches Einstein's determinism. This is not just theory, this is a fact. We have here one of those hadronic reactors for the synthesis on demand of the neutron from a hydrogen gas with a preferred direction, energy, and counts per second. So this is a machine that is continuously synthesizing neutrons from hydrogen atoms. This gives evidence for the Etherino. As Rogier noted significantly, the mass of the neutron is 0.782 megaelectron volts bigger than the sum of the masses of the electron and the proton. So where does this missing mass come from, the 0.782 megaelectron volts? It originates from the ether as the universal substrate of the extremely high density. The 0.782 is propagated from the ether to give its characteristics to the neutron. So the neutron has this additional 0.782 megaelectron character via longitudinal impulses. And these longitudinal impulses from the ether, Santilli has named the Etherino. So this machine is continuously demonstrating how the ether gives the characteristics to the particles via the Etherino, specifically in this case, the neutron from the synthesis of the single electron proton of the hydrogen atom. This is now an indisputable fact. And beautifully, Rogier would relay that our sun and other stars are producing neutrons at 10 to the power of 30 neutrons per second. It's 30 zeros behind the decimal, an enormous amount. So this reaction is taking place therein. Furthermore, Rogier Santilli has demonstrated that within the entanglement of the hyperdense media, you have different speeds of light, all the way to inside suns, where you can have an entanglement of the hadrons that are up to 75 times faster than the speed of light in a vacuum. This brings a significant new understanding to stars. Universal entanglement and the mystical implications. Answer 17 of our script interview. Rogier says a number of mystical aspects are inevitable. The first is that the continuous entanglement at a distance is characterized by contact, thus non-potential interactions, namely by purely ethereal interactions, because they carry no potential energy, where the wave packets overlap in infinite recursion. This is an extraordinary discovery of the non-potential oneness and ethereal interconnectedness of everybody, of everything, of the entire universe. Indeed, this is a philosopher's stone of sorts that splashes on the water of historical implications. Furthermore, to quote Ruggiero, another mystical aspect is caused by the fact that the wave packets of one electron fills up the entire universe. Wave packets of one electron fills up the entire universe. Absolutely extraordinary, because even though its intensity decreases with the inverse square of the distance, the wave packets of one electron is identically null only at infinite distance. We've had similar notions coming from Dr. David Bohm when he was observing the high-charged metals at Los Alamos National Laboratories in the 50s, where it looked like all of the electrons knew where all of the other electrons were. And he made a kind of holographic theory from that, that there is only one electron in the universe. This is now an extension of that by far, because it implies that every electron of our body, of matter, of all of materia and material energy are entangled universally. This is tremendously beautiful and tremendously mystical in implication, and spiritual as well as philosophical. It's a milestone. Consequently, the universe consists of one single entity with extended constituents, all in continuous and perennial entanglement, thus implying the possible existence of a kind of cosmic consciousness you have beautifully indicated in your question, which cannot be readily dismissed. Numerous other mystical aspects emerge when we add antimatter and eventually considering time. Indeed, that is true. So here we have several philosophical stones on the waters of history. We have a universally entangled universe. All space is entangled through the hyperdense media of the ether. All of the fundamental particles, as Ruggiero described with the electron, are of the same oscillations of the ether. And the wave packet of energy, the wave packet of electricity, and the wave packet of electrons that matter the size of the universe. So we are all entangled. We are more than holographic. So this is more than just a holographic theory of science. This is a universally entangled universe. Furthermore, the complementary total time entanglement is phenomenal. Here comes another philosophical stone upon the waters of our understanding of history. In a personal communication to me on July the 5th, Ruggiero wrote, I would also suggest to talk about the complementary total time entanglement, which is a consequence of the total space entanglement following known space-time symmetries. This implies the existence of a superior entity knowing all past, present, and future events. So this is almost the eschaton of eschatology. We are eschatologically minded, philosophically minded, and ontologically minded. So this is like the discovery of God in no short term of speaking. The existence of an entity superior, knowing all past, present, and future events, also of a cosmic consciousness, which in the academic studies of the idea of a cosmic intelligence is called anthropos. And anthropos is attributed to Christ in the Bible. Christ is, of course, described as the Word, the cosmic Christ, through which all creation is made, yet all that is made is the Word. This concept of anthropos stems back to Persian times, and recently it has been admitted and realized that the root source of it is the Purusa Sukta of the 10th book of the Rigveda, whose 32 lines, 16 verses describes this cosmic persona, this anthropos, this cosmic Christ, this living intelligence, cosmic consciousness. So this is the beginning of the unveiling of a tremendous significance of our reality. So this has impacts on Dr. Frank Tipler's work, The Physics of Immortality, where he made a series of trajectories, logistical trajectories for an omega point from Atelier de Chardin. However, these new findings that restore Einstein determinism in particle physics changes the logistics. It identifies logistical flaws. So there is a larger implication that emerges, which is tremendous. It's truly phenomenal and marvelous and beautiful. So we have a tremendous future up ahead in the many fields that will emerge from this, as well as beginning to gain a greater understanding of the wonder, the wondrous nature, all wondrous nature of our universe and its intelligence. Another area that we explored, and which we have explored a lot in our semantic artwork and public artwork presentations, is of course the conch shell morphology work pioneered by Dr. Chris Iller to have dynamic animated life being modeled. Foundations of Theoretical Conchellology by Chris Illert and Dr. Ruggiero Santilli deals with the basics of this. So Dr. Chris Illert was able to model conch shell morphologies, 100,000 conch shell morphologies, only with the ISO and Gino mathematics. When he tried with Euclidean mathematics, the simulated conch shell morphologies rapidly became brittle and crumbled. And he used 4 arrows of time to do this modeling. I was privileged by the donation of Dr. Eric Trell, who gave me in 2013 at a Hadronics board meeting in Norway, the Computational Methods in Sciences and Engineering, volume 13, 2013, which has a series of significant articles I would consider significant hadronic pieces. I have been given stacks of volumes of the hadronic literature, which I have meditated deeply through over the years, thanks largely to Dr. Sten Erik Johansson. Since 2001. In Gino Bragg's law, Dr. Alexander Animalu presented some very interesting additions to previous work. But here, showing from Iller the growing seashell in 6-dimensional space, doubling of the axes. Also, the formation of quasi-crystal assembly systems utilizing the hadronic horizon. Femto technology is the future. So 100,000 conch shell morphologies could be modeled only using these new hadronic mathematical branches, the isotopic mathematics, isomathematics, genomathematics. The bifurcation of the conch shell as it grows at all times has awareness of the flow of time in the future forwards, and the flow of time in the future backwards, and the flow of time in the past forwards, and the flow of time in the past backwards and forwards in future and past as it bifurcates. This has tremendous implication, and these are simple biological systems. Some illustrations of the different time flows that are occurring in this modeling of the conchal morphology. And again, 100,000 conchal morphologies were modeled on this basis. Now with human systems, we are much more complex than conchals. So the complexity of the new branch of hypergenetics, which is going to be phenomenal in the future for the first time, by understanding, restoring Einstein determinism to particle physics, the total entanglement of space, the total entanglement of time, the incorporating of antimatter coexistent, creating a multi-valued system, has tremendous implication on our biological systems. In formulating the question that triggered the wonderful response from Rogero, we asked from the literature, what is implied is the DNA a multi-valued hyperdimensional time machine, because that is extraordinary. It gives a completely new vantage of life. The idea that sap is not able to go up the trees at high altitudes, defying gravity and inertia, but instead using the alert dynamic system, using the 4 arrows of time, for example, is suddenly understood. It's no longer a mystery. It becomes part of the new science. So we have the total entanglement of space and the entanglement of time. And with these features, with these multi-valued systems, with the hypertopic plane, the hypermathematical branches, the hyper complexities and branches, we can begin to understand our genetics anew. Even the new chemical class after magnicals, hypermagnicals, can be understood operating in the nucleated DNA, not necessarily the uncoiled DNA. So new models of the DNA, a 4-arrow understanding of primitive life, and the more complex life forms of the DNA may soon have their ability to be studied with greater details. The new branch of hypergenetics will therefore be our future. This is part of answer 19 to this particular topic in the script for the TV series. There are serious indications, Rogero relays, there are serious indications that an effective representation of the DNA requires hypermathematics and hyperchemistry, which is reference 31. The correlation of 2 atoms in a DNA eventually produces one human organ, such as one eye, that has 10 to the power of 30 atoms. And that's a tremendous amount of atoms from an initial interaction of 2. As we explored, as was explored by Rogero, with 10 to the power 30 neutrons per second being produced by sun, similar complexities taking place in the formation of the eye. The biological notion of correlation between 2 atoms is mathematically represented by the multiplication. However, to continue to quote, the multi-valued character of said correlation then mandates the use of hyperstructures. I'm extracting for briefness. DNA is a hyperstructure in 3 space directions, each direction being multi-valued. A beautiful answer to my question. Hyperchemistry has a realistic chance of initiating the efforts for the deciphering of the DNA code precisely in view of its multi-valued character. the mystical aspect, deserving consideration by young minds of any age, is that the hyperstructural character of biological structure is immensely beyond the comparatively Lillopian capability of our mind. In the filmed interview, we caught another vantage of this where Ruggiero extrapolated beautifully. So the animated life of our body, of our biologies, is of such a tremendous complexity, multi-valued complexity, with different eras of time. And of course, we have an entangled universe. We have a universal ether. And another area that was explored, of course, was that of a continuous creation, a subject close to my heart for many years. And that is detailed in the script. Of course, the hypermagnicals of this new branch of hadronic mechanics, restoring Einstein determinism, has the many sperms acting as one in the insemination of the egg, operating as a hypermagnical. And so this hypermagnicular entanglement, this oneness, feature at the core of our genetics or hypergenetics is what is emerging. So the philosophical, the mystical, the spiritual sciences have been describing this oneness of all things. Here it is at the very life code, the animated not static, not dead captured electron microscope portions of DNA, but the dynamic. And the dynamics are so complex in all the trillions of cells of our body that a greater unity, a greater oneness, a hypergenetic intelligence is behind the genetic code, one that is aporeta. It's initially ineffable to comprehend as the complexities are so great. This is, again, a tremendous mystical implication of the restoration of Einstein determinism by this novel new branch of hadronic mechanics. It is a revision of who and what we really are, an increase in realizing, elucidating, identifying the miracle, the marvel of the intelligence of our biology that enables our sentience, our being, our logic, and our exploration. So these are the points we've extracted and just touched upon. Please look at the script, watch the documentary, and look out for the TV series Mystics, whether it's on Netflix, Amazon, or another platform. So our aim is to popularize hadronic mechanics to the layman. Param Jill is a great filmmaker, so it will be highly graphic, and there will be bits and pieces that will be coming out and spreading to millions and millions, hundreds of millions of people, so that the understanding of this new physics, of hadronic mechanics, becomes available, is inseminated, overcoming the quantum spellbinding force that is kind of holding back progress in these fields, including the mystical sciences. But of course, Santilli, purely as a scientist, nevertheless, from a mystical perspective, being a scientist and what he has discovered and what the associate professors have contributed could be seen as identical to a mystic. I am amidst extraordinary mavericks and thinkers, and we look forward to each of your presentations and contributions in the heralding of the restoration of Einstein determinism in these EPR debates. I thank you.